the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where we always have allergies. I'm Fars. I'm joined here by my co-host Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Hello. I'm taking an allergy pill right now.
I know Taylor looks like she's having allergy situations going on, and I also have allergy situations going on. And we also got a chance to hang out for the first time since January, right?
Yeah.
January was when you were in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was pretty cool. It was very fun. We went to a nice steakhouse in La Quinta, and my daughter was sick, but my son came and he had a great time.
Yeah.
It was very fun.
Gave him some business cards.
He loves them. So
and
cute.
It has the restaurant that we went to, the steakhouse we went to, is called LG's Prime Steakhouse. And LG is the name of the initials of the founder, who has long since passed. I think he passed in 2008. But they have this adorable painting of him in the lobby. I would give it like a romantic kind of vibe. Like it's like a modern, edgy looking steakhouse. Like it's a nice steakhouse, you know?
Yeah.
But then there's this one painting of this very, very feeble looking old man wearing a Christmas sweater of some kind.
It's definitely a Bill Cosby sweater, you know?
It's definitely a Bill Cosby sweater.
Yeah.
Different ramifications back then. But yeah,
back when that was okay.
It stands out. It is a painting that stands out amongst the modern artwork they have there. So it was fun though.
Yeah, very, very fun.
And now we're back home. I'm in Austin. You're in Joshua Tree, and you're about to leave again for LA, right?
Yep, I'm going to leave a little bit after this. I haven't even packed yet, but I'll get to it. Yep. I wanted to tell you yesterday, I was like in my one-on-one with my boss, and Florence is sick, my daughter, and I've said that. And so she's sitting, I opened up the bed in my office and on my couch, and she's sitting next to me, and I heard this voice, like a weird voice, and I was like, what is that? I looked over and she was listening to our podcast on YouTube, and I was like, ah, and I like screamed her name, and I was like, hold on, I had to like mute myself and be like, Florence, that's not for you. And she was like, I didn't hear any bad words, and I was like, that's not for you.
Is our podcast not child appropriate?
It's not child appropriate, no. Mm-mm.
Okay, do we need to put a disclaimer on?
No, it literally, it says we have an explicit next to all of our, next to everything. There's a big E.
Ooh, okay.
So like, you know, that's like parents' discretion.
Yeah. And your discretion is definitely not appropriate for Flo at this age. Okay.
Yes, she's
Makes
8,
sense.
so I'm going to say not for 8-year-olds.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and dive right in. So if I am doing my math correctly, you go first.
Yes.
So I'll describe what I'm drinking, and then you can segue into yours, okay? So
Let's do it.
Mine is a beer that I discovered while I was living in LA that I absolutely love. I keep drinking it. It is shocking how many calories are in this beer, but it is so well worth it. It is a Sierra Nevada IPA. I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can see what it looks like.
Wait, hold on. Let me screenshot you. A minute too.
Okay. Did you
Wait, I
have it?
didn't do it. No. Wait.
Okay.
Oh my God. So sorry, everyone. Okay. Continue.
If I remember, so I looked this up when I first fell in love with it and was like, I wonder, I mean, this feels so filling. I wonder why. It was like 360 calories or something. It was some
what in a can?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was I need to look it up again just to make sure I didn't get fact checked on that, but it's delicious. And because my story is going to take place in California, I wanted to have a Californian beer to reminisce about the upbeat story I will be telling later on.
Mine's in California too.
Okay. So also when me and Taylor were at this steakhouse this week, I asked Taylor what her topic was on, and she is truly committed because she was like, I'm not telling you. To my face. I was like, I'm not telling you. So that's how close to the chest we play these. So I did not know that your story was in California.
Hoping this is not, we don't have the same one, because I'm tiptoeing into true crime smidge, but from a long time ago. Was yours in the 1800s?
No.
Great. Then we're all set. Yes. So I'm drinking, well, this story has a lot of whiskey in it. So I'm just going to drink like a pint glass of whiskey for this one, which is not great. Don't do that. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So like we said, later today, I'm driving to LA for work. So I decided to take it back to the place that we lived in when we lived there and talk about Los Feliz, the neighborhood. I'm saying Los Feliz because I lived there for 8 years, but I know you could also say Los Feliz, whatever. I'll teeter back and forth. And specifically, the history of the man who donated the land to make Los Feliz, Silver Lake, and Griffith Park. So this is a story of Griffith J Griffith and his wife, Tina Messmer Griffith.
That is really exciting. Okay, so yeah, Taylor kind of teed this up. So we both lived in LA. That's how we met each other, was through a company worked at in LA, and we lived really close to each other for most of that time. Because
Yeah.
if you remember my first apartment, your friend is the one who hooked me up with it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was Nicole.
That's the DTF Nicole?
Yeah.
Okay, so she knew the guy who was wanting to sublease, and I rented
Yep.
from him. So that was Los Feliz, whatever. Who
We're
cares?
gonna go back and forth. Yeah.
And then after that, I moved into the apartment that I had in like Hollywood, which was right on the cusp of Los Feliz. So we were always kind of just like really close to each other. So like we're very familiar with this area. The Shark House, the Jaws house, is right there. Yeah, so exciting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great neighborhood. I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit too, because we can get some history of the area and a little bit more about it. Do want to trigger warning that there is some domestic violence that's going to happen in a little bit. So we'll get to that. But Griffith J Griffith was born in Wales on January 4th, 1850. I have no idea why anyone would ever name their child that. Like, are you gonna name your child Sokensange F. Sokensange? That makes no sense.
Griffith J Griffith. Yeah, it kind of worked. It depends on what kind of personality type he was, but it could work.
Yeah, I mean, the J stands for Jenkins, FYI, but Griffith J. Griffith. His family immigrated to the United States in 1865 and settled in Pennsylvania, and eventually he moved west to San Francisco. So his upbringing in Wales was very poor. He was always embarrassed by this, so he kind of wanted to have his own American dream. He always wanted to be part of high society. That's something that we'll talk about later. So he really had this like social climbing thing in the back of his head. While he was in San Francisco, he started working for the newspaper and he wrote stories on the mining industry. So it was like gold rush, mining time in California, and he learned a lot about it. So basically, he was able to flip the knowledge that he got from being a journalist to being sort of like a mining consultant. And that's how he made his fortune. So at 30 years old, he made a shit ton of money being a mining consultant in California. So he's rich pretty quickly in life.
Good for him.
Yeah. So in 1882, Griffith moved to Los Angeles and purchased approximately 4,000 acres of the Rancho Los Feliz Mexican land grant. So this is the fun part that I'm going to tell you about, the history of it.
You said 400, right?
4,000.
4,000?
Yeah, 4,000 acres of So this is the fun part. We're in the history of that area. So a land grant is an offering of the sale of land to a specific person or type of person, like a veteran or a rich person for a certain reason, or just someone who is willing to farm the land, like homesteading. So it's land that they have like reserved for a specific person. So California, that includes like the Baja California and part of Mexico, was obviously like native land for hundreds of thousands of years. And I know I mentioned on social media, like I read something like 90-something% of human history isn't recorded. So there's so much stuff that happened in California that we will never know about. You mentioned last week about South America having such a rich culture, and we don't know anything about it because, it was colonized. I read something this week that was like Spanish colonizers would go and see these beautiful cities, and then the next guy who went a couple of years later, they'd be gone because everybody was dead because of all those diseases. So real shitty that we don't know more about it. But the land in California was often given to Spanish missions and religious institutions. There's a lot of like missions in like San Diego, like those beautiful like old buildings. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like a mission, like a church.
Yeah. I mean, the Alamo. I'm being in Texas. The Alamo was a mission. Like that's what the facade resembles one. So
Exactly. So eventually it does get more secular. It opens up to more people. So at different times, the land that is California now belongs to different people. So there's the Spanish rule was 1769 to 1821. The Mexican era was 1821 to 1846. Then there was the Mexican-American War. And started in May 1846. James K. Polk was the president. He was the 11th president and responsible for the most land grabs of all presidents. So with the Mexican-American War and some treaties, he expanded the country by like 1.5 million square miles, like a crazy amount, like all of California and a big part of the East. So with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ending the Mexican War on February 2nd, 1848, so that war was just two years long, California became a territory of the United States. And then between 1847 and 1849, California was run by the military. And there was a government that was kind of stated in 1849. So after 10 months of being its own kind of government, California was admitted to the Union as the 31st state by the Congress as part of the Compromise of 1850 on September 9th, 1850. So some California history, how we got here. And this is, so about 30 years later, after
Taylor,
this,
can I interject real quick?
yeah,
So that means that California as a state has only existed for 170 years.
yeah.
Is that wild?
Hmm.
Like their culture's like there's like ruins in Egypt that are 30,000 years old, and as a state, California, that's
It's
weird.
too much. Yeah.
Yeah, weird to think
Yeah.
about.
Timelines are crazy. Like I even like when I look at the timeline that I made of this is episode 17, so much of it leans towards like even like 1500 to now. That's what we know about. And then know a little bit about up to like maybe zero and a couple of things below that, but like really, we don't there's so much we don't know. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
most of human history.
Yeah. So in 1882, Griffith gets Rancho Los Feliz. And then this is where I also have a weird, shameful confession. So Susie Izzard is a comedian that I love, and she had a bit where she was like, "Oh, we're on Lafayette Street." She's at a club on Lafayette Street in New York City. And she goes, "You know what that means, right, Americans? Like, you know about Lafayette." And I literally, at the time I was watching this, like on a DVD, I lived in a building called Lafayette, and I did not know about Lafayette. Like, I didn't know about the
I still don't
uh,
know.
he was like a French general who came to America, was really, really good friends with George Washington in Hamilton. He's in Hamilton. They call him the Lancelot of the Revolutionary set. He was like French. He went back and was involved in getting Marie Antoinette overthrown. So big part of American history. So now that I know more, I literally have like a plate that I found at the thrift store on my wall that's like Lafayette and Washington, inspecting the troops of Valley Forge. So like I know more now. I wish I knew even more, but I know who he is. And I was like, I'm so embarrassed about this. Like, I need to like learn more. And it kind of like clicked for me. And then it hadn't clicked yet that my passion was like being mad at the way we learn history, but I was embarrassed. And then I also just remembered that the L in L. Ron Hubbard stands for Lafayette. Did you know
No
that?
way. Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was literally just EL.
it was just an L.
Okay, it's just an L.
Yeah.
Lafayette Ron Hubbard.
Yep.
That name does not flow.
Yeah. Anyway, I fucking did it again. Like, I live in Los Feliz and didn't know the history of it. So, super embarrassed. I'm the worst. I'm an asshole, is my thing. So, Rancho Los Feliz was 6,647 acres. It was given in 1795 by Spanish Governor Pedro Fages to Jose Vicente Feliz. Like that's named after a person. He was a member of the 1775 to 1776 ANSA expedition that brought the first Spanish settlers to California. In 1781, he was one of the four soldiers who guarded the settlers. They founded the settlement, El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Angeles, which means the town of Our Lady, the Queen of Angels, which literally became Los Angeles.
Oh wow.
So like, what? So Jose Vicente Feliz was one of like the founding fathers of Los Angeles, and then he
Well,
had this ranch called the Los Feliz Ranch.
okay, so I'm mixing up the chronology. It sounds like the land grant was for Los Feliz territory.
Yeah, that was later.
That happened later. So Los Angeles was founded 1st.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So Los Angeles was on first, so I kind of skipped around a little bit, but anyway, so this is more about the land that Griffith ends up getting. So the land remained in the Los Feliz family until the 1800s when they sold it, and then Griffith got 4,000 acres of it in 1882. So that's how we're
Got
here.
it. Got it.
And I know I said this already, but like I fucking love it there. I know we just talked about it. I love where I live. Like this is where I live in Joshua Tree. I love it here. But I loved living in New York City. That was amazing. It would be a dream to have an apartment there that was like nice. But my absolute dream house would be in like the hills of Los Feliz.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. There's that murder house. The Frank Lloyd Wright house that was used in Vincent Price's House on Haunted Hill and in an S Club 7 video. And there's one by his son, that shark house where the Black Dahlia may have been murdered. That one's so cool. And when I had both of my kids, I got like 3 months off with them. And we would just go on walks just through those hills by those like beautiful houses. I listened to a lot of Karina Longworth's Haunted Hollywood. So, I would just like, I love this neighborhood. It's so pretty. So
It's so charming. It's so
so
lush. It's
nice.
so green. It feels weirdly private given the fact that it's in like
Yeah.
a part of Los Angeles. You are a street away from some of the best hiking trails, mountainous regions possible. Well, I guess they're hills technically, but still absolutely gorgeous in Griffith Park. And then Little Dom's was like
Yeah.
my favorite restaurant. It is so old-timey classic Italian.
Hmm. I went
Beautiful
there
neighborhood.
the day that Prince died. I had dinner with friends there, and they had like a purple cocktail you could buy. It was very sweet. Yeah, they have a wonderful zoo. The LA Zoo is in that area now. It's great. My kids love that zoo. There's that terrifying old zoo. Did you ever look at that?
Yeah, because that's where the haunted hayride always was. It went through the
Oh,
old zoo,
right.
remember? And it was like,
And the haunted hayride. I
how
loved the
in the
haunted
haunted hayride.
hayride.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
totally forgot about that. That was so fun. We did that a couple times. Yeah, the zoo has like really small enclosures
It's
because it was like,
disgusting.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was like the zoo before they had like animal rights.
Right.
So you can go visit it and like sit in the enclosures, which is crazy. Also, you remember Florence had her birthday party there? Where was that bouncy
Yep.
house and
The
we went
bouncy
on the
house, yeah.
carousel? So the carousel was actually built in San Diego, but it was moved there in 1937. So just FYI. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. It's great. It's a dream. So now it belongs to it's 1880s. It belongs to Griffith J Griffith, and he wants to be very popular in LA society. He's rich. He wants to, be the guy, but people think he's annoying. They're a little bit like he's new money. He's kind of like, I don't know, like they don't love him. So he's having a hard time like getting into these circles. So in comes the Mesmer family of California. They are from France, like the Alsace-Lorraine area, which is where my people are from, between France and Germany. The patriarch was Louis Mesmer. He was another founding father of LA. You could say something like that. Like he laid the first sidewalk. He built hotels. So another like prominent man in Los Angeles. So LA was indigenous, then Spanish, then had the ranchos, and then it was American, then it was like a post World War II boom, and then now it is now. But this is sort of the American part, and Louis Mesmer is in the top ranks. He has a daughter named Mary Agnes Christina Mesmer. Her name is Tina. She was born February 29th, 1864. So Tina, grew up in Los Angeles. She had money from her parents, but she actually had her own fortune because they had a family friend, Andre Spritzwalter, and he left her money in his will. So she's independently wealthy as well. For what it's worth, she was Catholic and Griffith was Protestant. So I wrote A Tale as Old as Time. Like obviously that's gonna be a thing.
Yes. Yes. The
Um,
Capulets and the Montagues.
yeah. So there are rumors that some of her family and friends were like, this dude's new money. He's kind of annoying. Like he really wants to be rich. Everyone can tell. Like, I don't know if he's like the one for you. But Tina marries him anyway. So Griffith and Tina get married. They have one son. His name is Vandal. He will eventually be on the police commission in LA, so he does pretty well for himself. There isn't a lot about him, but Find a Grave says that he ran away from home at certain points, which I think is fair because you better find out why.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What were you referencing just there?
Find a Grave.
What does that mean?
It's like a website where you can, well, that's the only place that I had saw information about him, but you can go to findagrave.com and put in like anyone who has a grave and they'll tell you where it is. Or I guess
Seriously?
probably maybe not anyone, but like famous people.
Wow. I've never heard of this. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Erin Morin died on this day in 2017. She played oh my God, Ron Howard's sister and Joanne
In
Joni.
Happy Days?
Yeah, in Happy Days.
Joni. Yeah.
Joni, yeah. It's on the
Um,
website. I don't know why whatever.
you can spend a lot of time on Find a Grave.
Apparently.
Do that later. Yeah. So Tina and Griffith are married. They're doing rich people shit in Los Angeles. The mining is essentially passive income, so you just have a lot of money. December 16th, 1896, Griffith and his wife Tina gave 3,015 acres of the Rancho Los Feliz to the city of Los Angeles for use as a public park. He called it a Christmas present, and after accepting the donation, the city passed an ordinance to name the property after him. So that's why it's called Griffith Park. You also can see there's a statue of him still outside of it as well.
Yeah, I remember.
So here's what he said about it, quote, "It must be made a place of rest and relaxation for the masses, a resort for the rank and file, for the plain people. I consider it my obligation to make Los Angeles a happy, cleaner, and finer city. I wish to pay my debt of duty in this way to the community in which I have prospered." That's great. I love it. Thank you. I'm definitely a plain person, and I loved it.
Yeah.
So it's
That was
beautiful.
very sweet.
Yeah, it's great. And he also like put in the stipulations that like if they ever tried to make it into anything else besides a park, that his family could take it back. So like he really wanted to keep it a park, which is great, but it's still a park. So even all this has happened, he still doesn't feel as popular as like he wants to feel. And that's sort of like one of the red flags is he just like needs this social status like more than normal people. Even though he has the money, he wants the fame. And now he doesn't feel like he's being like treated the right way after giving all this land. So he starts to kind of go insane. Like he starts to get really, really paranoid. And mostly it's because he starts drinking, probably becomes a big part of it. So he drinks like just so much whiskey every day, and is like thinks people are trying to poison him. He thinks people are trying to kill him. He thinks the Pope wants to kill him. He thinks his family wants to kill him. He's just like having all these paranoid delusions, and he's in like a really terrible place.
And I'm sure he's just like jostling around a giant, empty, cavernous living room as well.
Yes, exactly. So he's like living in a mansion, and just like thinking that everybody's out to get him. It's definitely like a nightmare in that house because he's like yelling and accusing everybody of everything. He's probably
Just be
famous
happy
here.
being rich.
I know, being famous sounds kind of annoying, just like
Yeah,
be rich.
so many famous people say like, I miss the moment when I could just go get like a coffee in public.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody like staring at you. Totally. But he still wants it. That's his thing. On September 3rd, 1903. So Vandal, their son, is 15. They've been married for a while. They are vacationing in Santa Monica at the Arcadia Hotel, which doesn't exist anymore, but they're in Santa Monica, like on vacation. Tina was alone in the room when Griffith came in with a loaded gun. And he's definitely drunk, definitely like losing his mind. He made her get on her knees, and he had a note card with some questions written down, like pre-written down, and he asked them to her. He asked her if she had been involved in killing Andre Britz, the person that she had inherited the money from, and she was like, "No, of course not. I would never have done that." Like if he asked her if she had poisoned him. She was like, "No." He asked her if she had been poisoning him, and she was like, "No, I would never hurt you. Like, of course I haven't been doing that." During this, she's praying because he's like got a gun pointed at her head. And then he asked her if she'd been faithful, and she said, "Yes, of course, I've been faithful." And then he shoots her in the head, and she does not die. The
Ugh.
bullet hit her eye socket, shattered part of the bone, and then part of the bone and the bullet went up into her skin and ended up under her skin between her skin and her skull. Her eye was destroyed. She asks him why he shot her, and it's confusing, and he doesn't
Wait,
know
she's
what's going.
still awake?
Oh yeah, she jumps out the window because they're on like the second floor. She jumps out the window, lands on like the roof of like the portico underneath her, breaks her shoulder, crawls along the roof, and then goes into the window of another room that happened to be open to get to
That's
safety.
crazy.
I
That's
know.
crazy.
So the hotel called the doctor. They couldn't even bring her to a hospital that day because it was like 1903. So she was like they sedated her, took her to a hospital. They weren't sure if she was going to survive, but she survived. She had obviously like a lot of facial scars, but she survived. Griffith was arrested for attempted murder. His lawyer claimed that he was insane because of the drinking. And it seems kind of fair because he was definitely like losing his mind. And the paranoia had been getting like worse and worse and worse. Tina testified that everything that had happened, when she did, she had a black veil over her face. There's a really great court drawing of it. She had a veil hiding her face, and then she had to go to each member of the jury and lift the veil and show them what he had done to her.
Ugh.
So each person like saw her like weird eye socket. He ended up being charged with assault with a deadly weapon, sentenced to 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine.
That
So
seems light.
I know, but he didn't. He was charged with attempted murder, but or whatever, but he ended up getting assault with a deadly weapon.
Wow. Okay.
In 1904, Tina was granted a divorce and full custody of Vandal. Griffith still had to pay for his education, like child support and stuff. She went in to get the divorce, and the judge was like, "Why do you want a divorce?" And she was like, "Well, he shot me in the face." And the judge was like, "Done." And it was like a record. It took 4.5 minutes for the judge to give her that
Yeah. Good for her.
thing. Yeah. She goes on, like lives with a family. She died in 1948 at the age of 84. So they never had contact again. Griffith served 2 years and then was released. He has the world's best mugshot. I don't know if you want to Google it. I'll put it in the thing. It's so good. He came out sober and was like, "Well, I'm still rich." So he still tried to like be a part of LA society. He tried to give money to LA to build an observatory and a Greek theater. The city accepted the money, but the park commission was like, "No, like you can't, I don't want to build those things under your name because you tried to kill your wife. So let's stop taking money from this guy." But of course,
This mugshot is incredible.
it's incredible.
Like he looks like so annoyed. He looks like a lobotomy patient.
He looks like Elmer Fudd.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. They all kind of look like that back then, right?
Yeah, it's pretty great. So he tried to give the money to the city. They said no, but of course, there is a Griffith Observatory and there is a Greek theater. So he willed the money to the city to build them. So after Griffith died on July 6, 1919, of liver failure, he willed the money to the city, and the city did build the Griffith Observatory, which is awesome. and the Greek theater,
Beautiful.
which is also awesome. He is interred at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and if you stand at his grave, you can see the Griffith Observatory.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I love the observatory. It's such an iconic piece of LA
hmm
architecture.
hmm That's it.
That is really interesting.
It's
I
crazy. Yeah.
obviously people had a hand in all this stuff. It's just like, yeah, it's weird. I mean, I lived there 7 years and I never once thought of it because it's interesting because the character of Los Feliz is so vastly different than Echo Park, Silver Lake, or all these other places. The reason I think it's so different is the park is there. The
hmm
park is so because I mean Silver Lake has Silver Lake, but it's different. It just doesn't have the same
Yeah. I
kind of
mean, and
vibe.
park is like isn't even the right word. Like you said, like it's like hills. Like it's 4,000 acres. It's not like it's huge.
Yeah.
There's tons of like hiking trails and stuff to do. There's horses and there's like all there's a that little cafe and like it's just like such a beautiful space. And it's not like flat like Central Park. It's like hills. So you can go on like hikes and you can also drive up to the top and the observatory is awesome. We went with our daycare one time and the kids all saw like a um show about the stars like inside of it. It
Yeah.
was so
Yeah.
cool. It has a big like
Leonard Nimoy's the narrator of that, I think.
yes, yes. I saw the fireworks there when 4th of July. We were like up halfway up the hill and we could see them like all over the city. It was beautiful. So it's such a great place. So super grateful that it's there, but pretty wild life of the Griffiths and wild that we like know we know his name from the park, but we like don't know that he also tried to kill his wife and like kind of went crazy and yeah.
I've only almost died twice while hiking, and one of those times was in 2019 in Griffith Park.
How'd you almost die?
Well, because I was ill prepared, so I just
Ah,
didn't take enough food with me. I didn't take enough. I got those goo packs and was like, I just stuffed them in my backpack, and I was like, I'm never gonna have these. They were in there for like a year. I literally ate all of them on that one hike because I was just I'm gonna die if I don't get down soon. It was awesome.
oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, glad you
Um,
survived.
I know. I'm glad I survived too. Everything's going swimmingly. Well, Taylor, thank you for sharing that story. I'm going to transition us over to the true crime side of today's stories. And through the power and magic of audio editing, nobody's going to know that I totally screwed up the original link for this call.
Perfect.
Perfect. So
Perfection.
I'm heading back into spousal death territory today.
Right.
It'll be a really exciting one. So this one's a pretty infamous one. It's kind of long ago enough to where, I don't know, it doesn't hit as hard as some of the more recent ones I do. I'm going to cover someone that gets confused with somebody else I covered already in the past. So it's California, and this guy gets confused with somebody else in the past. Taylor, do you know who I'm talking about?
Is it Scott Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cool guy himself, the coolest dude in the world.
That blonde
The
piece
blonde,
of
cool
shit.
dude.
Yeah, I'm ready.
This case, like I said, it's a while ago. This case is from 2002, but it received renewed attention recently when some jury misconduct during Scott's original trial was discovered.
Oh, I
And
know that.
yeah, and his sentence was appealed. This like literally just happened, like 5-6 months ago. So it's pretty recent. But spoiler alert: Scott is still in jail. So the latest attempted freedom also didn't work. So
For the best.
let's get into our main characters, starting with the man himself, Scott Peterson. At the time of these crimes, Scott was 30 years old. He was originally from San Diego. His parents had 6 kids in total, but Scott was the only one they had together. So a lot of half siblings.
Oh, okay.
Or
That
step siblings.
I feel like that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 'cause I mean, what, 2, 3, and then there's one that you have together. So
Yeah.
Scott, one thing to his credit is he was a born golfer. He was incredibly, incredibly good at golfing. He consistently ranked near the very top of golfers in his age bracket and even won a golf scholarship eventually to Arizona State University.
Cool.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to start in on my editorial stance on my opinions of this guy.
Okay.
Right off the bat, I'm going to flag 2 things that annoy me.
Okay.
Arizona State University and being exceptionally good at golf at a young age.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Tell me why.
Okay, so during this time period when Scott would have been at ASU, Playboy magazine ranked it as a top party school in the country.
I knew that about it. Yeah.
Okay. I just picture fraternities, frat
Yeah.
bros. I picture a lot of popped collars.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I feel I mean, it it was always portrayed as a place to me that you don't necessarily go to learn. You go there to
Yeah.
party. I don't know if that's really true, but that was the reputation. And probably because of that article you mentioned.
Well, it's also self-selecting, right? So like if Playboy
Yeah,
says it's a party school, then who goes to that school?
exactly.
Yeah, there's not a lot of Einsteins graduating from ASU. Although look, if you went to ASU, God bless you. Maybe it's turned into a good school now, but it's just like when I think about it, I just think of like girls in bikinis and guys pouring terrible beer on them. I don't think
Yes.
about like academics and rigor of that sort.
Yes.
When it comes to the golf bit, I will admit, I don't play golf. I've tried it. I don't like it. And I will admit that I'm actually really impressed by people who are really, really good at golf because it is so difficult to get good at. It is deceptively hard to golf. Have you ever golfed, Taylor?
I've like mini golfed. I've never like actually golfed.
It's so hard. It's like
Yeah.
you're using a stick to hit a tiny ball hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards towards a tiny, tiny little hole with like a bunch of shit in the middle of it. With
Yeah.
trees and like sand traps and lakes that usually have alligators in them. Like it's crazy difficult. So it's actually really impressive when someone's really good at it. My issue is his dad was really good too. He was beating his dad at golf by the time he was 14 years old, which is just weird. Is that weird? Like is that like
No, that's great. For a 14-year-old boy, it can be grown-up sized. I don't know. I feel like
but like I don't know if I don't so again I don't have kids so I don't know what this is like, but I'm like go wrestle, go play baseball, go play basketball, go to theater school. Like golf, why is your socialization activity and your athletic endeavors putting you in the same category as 67-year-old dentists? Like I go hang out with
I
your
mean,
own type. Like
go hang out with your own type. I
that
don't know.
sounds really bad. I have to edit that out.
Oh my God. So, okay, Tiger Woods turned professional by the age of 20. So I feel like, he was obviously, I mean, I didn't watch the movie, but like obviously he was like very stressed out his whole entire life, but he definitely did it his whole life. The Serena and Venus Williams turned tennis pros at the age of 14. Like
But you don't think that tennis is different than golf?
tennis and golf are both very posh sports. I've
Wait,
never been to a tennis match.
hold on. You've never been to a tennis match?
No.
Okay, do you know who like some of the better tennis players are?
Yeah.
Okay, are any of them 68 years old?
No.
Okay,
Oh,
so
so you're saying everybody's old in golf?
yeah,
Well, but that gives them a long time to be. I mean, I don't care. This isn't.
this isn't a hill to die on. I get it. I get it. To me though, it's just like
Sure.
there's something about him where it's like you tie ASU and the golf thing, and you're just like,
I mean, if you
ooh,
already don't like him, then like that's gonna. Yes.
that might put
Like,
you over the top.
indeed.
Okay, I'm gonna keep harping on the golf thing because he was crazy good at this. So when he was at ASU, because again, he got a scholarship to ASU for golfing. And he was in the same golf team. He was on the same golf team as Phil Mickelson, who, if you don't know, is probably one of the most famous and recognizable golfers in the country.
Wow.
Yeah. He's like, it's Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, basically. Scott got kicked off the team because he took a kid named Chris Couch, who was also on the team drinking when Chris was underaged. And Chris's dad complained because, he complained to the coach of the golf team and got Scott kicked off the team because he was just a helicopter dad, right? He was like, my kid's trying to become good at golfing, and you have another golfer on this team who's just taking a kid out, getting him hammered. He's a bad influence, kicking this guy out of the team, which he did.
Yeah.
Chris was actually really good, so he also ended up becoming a professional golfer on the PGA Tour. Scott was in the same ranks as these two professional golfers.
Wow.
I mean, that's impressive, despite all the shit I literally just talked.
Well, that's what I mean.
Nobody sound right. I can talk shit.
No.
So later, he would bounce around to a few other universities because at that point he got kicked out of ASU because the golf scholarship went away when he got kicked off the team. He eventually would graduate with a degree in agricultural business. That was what he focused on. While he was in college, Scott worked at a restaurant, and while working at that restaurant, he met a girl named Laci Denise Rocha. I think it's Rocha. It's Rocha. Rocha or Rocha? It's Rocha, right?
Yeah.
Okay. She was also a college student at this time, and she was studying horticulture. The two would get friendly and eventually start dating. They'd move in together, and in 1997, got married. It was a pretty quick turnaround time.
Yeah. And they're
Scott
really
would-
young.
And they're really young, super
Mhm.
young. Scott would take a job selling fertilizer. And, well, I wrote, I think. He took a job for a company that manufactures fertilizer. Maybe he was like back of house doing P&L statements, or he was selling fertilizer. I'm not 100% sure. He made good money, it sounds like. He made about $5,000 a month. And that was in like 1997 money. So that's probably like $10,000 a month now, give or take.
Totally.
Laci took up substitute teaching, and that was kind of their lives. Around this time, they would also buy a house in Modesto, California. And 2 years later, Laci would get pregnant with a due date that will become relevant later on of February 10th, 2003. In November of 2002, Scott would meet his future mistress. Do you remember her name?
No.
Amber Fry.
Amber Fry.
Yeah. Who he told was single. He told her he's single when they met. So, obviously. December 23rd, 2002 would be the last time anyone would see Laci alive. We know that she was alive up till 8:30 p.m. on December 23rd of that day because her mom and her spoke on the phone, and her sister saw her in person at the hair salon she worked at. So, December 23rd, 2002, 8:30 p.m. Last time she's ever heard of again. So I'm going to get into what Scott's versions of the events are, but let's start with what we know for sure, because Scott's version is a little wishy-washy. On April 13th, 2003, so just under 4 months from her disappearance, a couple was walking near the shores of San Francisco Bay when they stumbled on the decomposing body of a late-term male fetus washed ashore. I know. I read that and was just like, oh, like, it's so clinical. It just, I don't know. It sounds worse saying it that way.
It does. Oh, that's awful.
The next day, so April 14th, someone else found the body of a woman washed up about a mile from where the fetus was discovered. Her head and her limbs were missing.
Ugh.
4 days later, DNA testing would confirm that these were the bodies of Laci Peterson and the son that they had decided to name Connor.
Mm-hmm.
They were obviously autopsied, and mostly everything came back inconclusive. They've been in the water for so long, it's tough to nail things down.
How did he get out of her?
Yeah, so this is the part that's kind of gross. During the autopsy, it was clear that her cervix was intact. So something ripped her stomach open, and the baby was extracted that way.
Like an animal, or like
either an animal or like maybe there's like underwater water flow happening that just smashed her against a rock and then it's severed her. Like, I mean, look, this is the ocean. There's like 80 million ways to be killed by it, and so it could have been an animal. It could have been just currents and rocks and things like that.
Oh my god!
But the only thing that they do know for sure is the baby died in utero. So Laci died.
Mm-hmm.
Baby dies.
Mm-hmm.
They go in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, some way, definitely not through natural birth, the baby is extracted from her body. Wow. Her body was really badly messed up. So like she had all kinds of broken everything. Like I said, her limbs were missing.
Yeah.
There was no assumptions that the person who killed her took her limbs or did this themselves. This is all natural. Natural. It was all nature that did this.
Oh, that's like is that the beach where like feet always come up, I'm sure?
So it is the same coast. It's the same coast, but I think that beach is actually in Canada. So I think you got to go a little further north, and it's up there near BC area, Vancouver area.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's the same thing. Because like people die in the water, and then like their whole body gets ripped apart, but their feet stay in their shoes.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, it's because like the shoe like kind of protects your foot. So while like the rest of your body is getting like, eaten by animals and like busted along rocks and stuff, like eventually your ankle will break off, but your foot will stay in your shoe, and the shoe will float away.
Yeah, there was so many clinical things that were going on here. So apparently, the reason the kid wasn't so messed up was because it was still wrapped around the
right. I was gonna say
whatever it's called,
the sack and everything.
The sack. We're so scientific here. Whatever it's called, that was
placenta.
Still there. Placenta, yeah. So the baby was actually weirdly preserved. I mean, this thing had been dead for like 4 months in the ocean, and they could still figure out all the details of it. Laci, they couldn't. Like that was, I mean, she was just goo at that point. Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Scott told police. So here we're getting into his side of it. So Scott told police that the morning of December 24th, remember last she was heard of was the 23rd,
Mhm.
he left to go golfing and Laci was watching a Martha Stewart show. He said he came home later that afternoon, found the house empty, and Laci's stepfather would ultimately be the one that ends up reporting Laci missing to the police. So Scott isn't even the one who did it.
Also, like, isn't it Christmas?
Yeah,
Aren't there
well,
Christmas plans?
it was Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I said people must be like expecting her to come over for Christmas
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Well, so I'm gonna get into there's the Peterson family does a lot of bending over backwards to try and find justifications for why he's innocent. That the point you're raising is one of those points that they also there's a whole separate section about this.
I also have some theories, so continue.
Yeah, I would love to hear them because it is the lack of evidence here is very very interesting.
Yeah.
Unique. So two lead detectives, Alan Brocchini and John Bueller, went to the house and immediately suspected Scott. They were, obviously they're going to suspect the spouse initially, but they would say that he didn't seem very concerned. He seemed kind of disinterested, like he was kind of aloof. Like he didn't seem like someone was like, my 8-month pregnant wife is gone. Tomorrow's Christmas.
Right. You should be more worried.
You should be more worried. It gets so gross. The story gets so gross. Later on, Scott would say that he wasn't golfing. He was actually fishing that day. So his story changes, which is suspect. Interestingly, Laci's parents initially defended Scott on all of this stuff. They had his back on all of this. They were like, there's no way Scott did it. It took a while for them to slowly change their tune. One of the reasons they changed their tune is that it was uncovered in mid-January, about a month after the disappearance, or like maybe 3 weeks after the disappearance, that Scott had engaged in 3 extramarital affairs, including Amber Fry. So he was constantly cheating on her, basically.
Totally.
You're gonna say something?
I'm just thinking, like, if you are telling the truth, your story doesn't change because it's the truth, And if you're like saying a bunch of stuff that contradicts itself and is weird, like it's probably because you can't freaking remember what you were going to say.
You know what? It's funny because I sort of agree with you, but there's something consistent about Scott, which is he had whatever job he had was very leisurely because this guy was constantly either fishing or playing golf.
Right, he's out doing white people activities.
It's weird. It's like he just bounced between those two. Like I read at some point in his adult life he'd owned 5 boats. Like he was just constantly doing these activities, and I mean, so and a part of me is like, I don't know, was I fishing that day or was I golfing? I don't know. Like, part of it is that too. So again, as with the mistress from our Chris Watts story, she is kind of the unsung hero. The second this story got attention, because of course it did, because Laci and Scott are good-looking
white people.
Yeah, you can say it, and she's missing and she's pregnant and there's no evidence of anything. So like it immediately went into national attention territory.
Yeah.
At which point Amber went to the police and basically pointed out 3 things. Said, I'm dating Scott. Scott told me he's single. Scott even told me 2 weeks before Laci disappeared that he is a widower. Not good.
Yeah.
Which I think Drew Peterson did too. If I remember correctly, I think Drew Peterson also said that his living wife was dead. So Amber agreed to let the police record phone conversations with Scott. During one of these calls, this is crazy. And I remember this from when it originally happened, and they called it out. I was like, oh my God, I remember this. During one of these romantic calls they had with each other, this is like days after Laci is missing, Scott told Amber that he was in Paris for the holidays with friends. Do you remember this?
Yes.
He was at Laci's candlelight vigil.
Like, she's not going to fucking see that on TV?
So crazy.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, she's going to find out.
Dude, like, this is why I always say, when in any situation, the cover-up is almost always worse than the crime.
Oh my God, so stupid.
Because it is these little spots of details that the jury strung together to say, like, because we'll find this out later on. There's actually no direct evidence that he did anything to Laci. Right. It is all 1,000 little things that he did. Him being an idiot, like just 1,000 little things that they tied together.
Like what? It's just so stupid to be like, I am in Paris. Like, oh, I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower. Like, what a weird thing to say. Like, oh, I decided last minute to fly to Paris with my buddies for Christmas. It's late
Yeah.
here. Bonjour. Like, whatever. What an idiot. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because given time zones, she would have she would have thought it's like 3 a.m. for him, because a candlelight
Yeah.
vigil isn't held at like noon.
No,
It's
at
only
night.
candlelight, and at that
Yeah,
time, it's just, man, not good. Not a
It's a,
smart
did
guy.
you ever watch the show Alias with Jennifer Garner?
No.
It was like it's like kind of dumb, but a very like 90s action show. But she was a spy, but she would pretend that she would always go to San Diego for business, but like really she'd like go to China and like do spy things and come back. And I'm like, why don't you just say you're going to China for business? Because you're still having to like call people and make stuff up. Like, why wouldn't you just be like, oh, I have to go to China, so they would think that the time zone. Whatever. I thought that was dumb. She was always like in San Diego when like, why not just tell them where you are? Or like, I don't understand.
It's
Anyway,
funny, when you initially said that, I thought I'd probably prefer to say I'm in San Diego than to say I'm in China, because you got to answer a lot more questions when you go to China than when you go to San Diego.
I guess that seems fair.
But then it's hard to keep
Fine.
the truth up.
Yes, it
Anyways,
is.
Scott isn't an espionage professional, so this
There
did not
are
work.
very few, which is another part of our
Yeah,
yes.
themes.
Bring that back. Yeah.
So after the bodies were discovered, police put a tracker on Scott's car because they thought he was going to run away to Mexico. This is Modesto, California. He was raised in San Diego, and he's in the La Jolla area. He could easily just hop over to Mexico and just disappear if he chose to. That's what they were worried about. I think I mentioned Scott's arrest in one of the previous episodes. It might have been the Chris Watts one, but the day of the Laci and Connor's autopsy, the days after that autopsy happened, Scott decided to go play a round of golf in La Jolla, and it was here at this round of golf game is when he was arrested. This is so funny to me. He dyed his brown hair. He'd never dyed his
Yes.
hair. He had never in his childhood, teenage years, or adulthood dyed his hair, but he did this time. He dyed his hair blonde. He had $15,000 in cash in his car. He had survival gear, camping gear, a ton of extra clothes, multiple cell phones, 2 IDs. He had his own ID and his brother ID, and his brother looks kind of like him. And he went golfing. This is all found in his car, and he goes golfing, which is just phenomenal.
That's all stuff that innocent people do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're obviously not going to get out on what is it when they give you when they let you out on cash bail, bond, parole,
Yeah.
bond, bond. Like, you're not going to get out because like you clearly have all the signs of someone who's about to make a run for it. He ends up getting charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and pleads not guilty. His trial started on June 1st, 2004, which would have made it one of the first major TV trials. So this would have been 7 years ahead of Casey Anthony and 9 years ahead of Jodi Arias, other 2 massive TV trials. It's, again, worth noting, there is absolutely nothing directly tying Scott to the deaths of Laci and Connor. Nothing. Like, there's no camera footage, there's no confession, there's no he told me, hearsay, alibi, like none of that, which is crazy.
He was just acting weird about it the whole time, but there's no like, here's what happened.
Which is like, is he a genius?
No. But what happened? That's crazy. We don't know what happened.
Yeah, we really don't know what happened. We have a lot of different pieces of the puzzle we can put together. So the prosecution said Scott created 4 homemade cement anchors and tied those to Laci's body and dumped her in the ocean. Again, her body was discovered 4 months after she was in the ocean, probably at the bottom of the ocean until her
Until her limbs broke
her
off.
limbs came off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So she was at the bottom of the ocean until her limbs came off, and then she floated to the top. So there's nothing left. There's nothing left to like, oh, she died of asphyxiation. Like, what? She's she's wide open. So they don't even have a cause of death for her, really.
Wow.
The defense had a host of arguments. They said that sonar equipment used to find the anchors couldn't find the anchors. They said that some random prostitute killed Laci. They said that the baby found was full term, which would have meant that she had been kidnapped and that she'd been held by somebody, which would have precluded Scott. They were basically throwing whatever they could at trying to defend him. Like, there really wasn't much to it. The prostitute thing was somebody was stealing their mail, but that started happening like 2 months after Laci disappeared, and Scott reported it. So he has whatever.
Oh, he reported that.
Yeah, it didn't report Laci exactly. And yeah, like I said, by contrast, prosecution really couldn't tie him to the murders in any way. They just had all this circumstantial evidence that pointed to him having some involvement. There were some things that he did that indicated he knew she wasn't going to come home. So, for example, days after she disappeared, he added porn channels to his home cable setup, which would indicate, well, nobody's going to know this is here because nobody's coming home. He sold her car, the car that she had. She had like basically a generic mom car. He sold that and bought himself a pickup. So he was like, well, we're not going to need this car that has room for a back seat in it. So let's get rid of that one. And then the secret recordings of Amber Fry were also played out in court, which definitely did not make him look good.
No.
So 5 months after the start of his trial, Scott would be convicted of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. He was ultimately sentenced to death by lethal injection.
Wow.
In 2020, Scott appealed his sentence due to a number of proclaimed errors with his trial, including improper jury handling and allowing of evidence that should not have been admitted. This went up to the Supreme Court of California, which upheld his conviction, but they overturned the death sentence because there was basically a death penalty question during the jury selection period that the trial judge allowed in without proper follow-up. And they said that that could have been enough to get him the death sentence if it wasn't for the judge not asking proper follow-up questions. Basically, long story short, it doesn't really matter. But like during the sentencing phase, they'll ask the jury, like, or during the jury selection phase, they'll ask the people on the jury, hey, how do you feel about the death penalty? And somebody says, I'm opposed to it. And then you're supposed to follow up with that and say, does that mean that you would be incapable of rendering the verdict or the sentence if the law proclaims that's just? And you're supposed to ask that. And if they say, no, I wouldn't be able to do what the law says because that's how I feel about it, then they kick you off. But he didn't do that. He just stopped with like, I don't believe in the death penalty, kicked him off. So basically they only got pro death penalty advocates. So it makes sense. The conclusion makes sense.
Sure.
Obviously, there's more appeals that are flying through all this. There was another one that went to the California Supreme Court in 2015. It was based on the fact that a juror lied during jury selection, but the court decided that wasn't enough. And so they basically said that, yeah, the juror did not tell the full truth, but it was immaterial to the case anyways. So he's still in prison. They took away his death penalty and rendered a sentence of life imprisonment. So he's going to stay there. He's not up for parole ever. Mm-hmm. And that's probably where he's going to end up for the rest of his life. So on the Scott Peterson is innocent side of the aisle, really, it's mostly his family, though I'm curious to hear your theories on this as well. Mm-hmm. They launched an org and a website that's called scottpetersonappeal.org, which like makes you wonder, what is scottpeterson.org? Because was that already taken?
That's a great question. Oh, I see it. Seeking justice for Scott, Laci, and Connor. Wow.
Yeah, so they described their version of events and things the state kind of failed to prove. The website's actually pretty thorough. It's a pretty sizable amount of content on there. And they've actually uploaded his entire trial to a Dropbox folder that you can download and watch yourself. Some of the facts they point to are kind of indisputable and do seem odd, but don't necessarily point towards innocence. So to your earlier point,